Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the Conservation Podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and today I am joined by Lynn Mento, the CEO of Conservation Nation. She is here to discuss the importance of diversifying the world of conservation, and how Conservation Nation is going about doing this. We discuss the way that they are trying to elevate emerging voices in the conservation space, inspire the next generation, and provide funding to projects around the world. We also make some time to talk about some of the projects which Lynn is the most proud of, such as the one taking place in Yellowstone National Park, and one that has to do with elephants and bees, and it's so interesting, I can't wait for you all to hear about it. Finally, we also make some time to talk about Lynn's favourite animal, the somewhat frightening but fabulous cassowary. I couldn't miss an opportunity to talk about them. I love them so much, and so it's a great conversation, so make sure and get excited for that as well. Now, we have a lot to talk about today, so without further ado, let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I am now joined by Lynn Mento, who's the CEO of Conservation Nation, an organisation which is dedicated to diversifying the field of conservation. So we have a lot to chat about, and it's a cause that I think is close to my heart, to a lot of our listeners' hearts, so really excited to chat with you today, Lynn. First of all, I just want to say a massive thank you for being here and giving me your time today. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Jack.
Thank you so much. I guess I gave you a brief introduction there, but the first thing I always like to do with my guests is let them introduce themselves, because obviously you know your work and your background a lot more than I do. So please tell me, introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell them a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
So as you said, I run a new organization in the States out of Washington, D.C. called Conservation Nation. And as you noted, Jack, we are dedicated to saving wildlife around the world by building a stronger, more diverse, more representative core of conservationists, because we believe actually that's the only way that we are going to successfully win the fight to save the planet. So we've been doing that. We launched about a year ago, so we are new, and we arose from Friends of the National Zoo, and I know you are a zoo fan, and so we were about a 62-year-old organization in Washington, D.C., dedicated to support of the Smithsonian's National Zoo and the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. And we weren't able to make it through the pandemic with the zoo and the Smithsonian. So we pivoted and took up this, what we believe is this enormous challenge, opportunity, and need to create more diversity in the conservation space so that we can win and save the planet for all of us.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And I think especially, yes, during the pandemic, I think a lot of organizations struggled and had to pivot and kind of really rethink kind of the core of their missions and kind of how they were going to make it through this difficult time. So it's really excellent to hear that you kind of were able to do that and kind of come out the other side in a new reformed way that is still really effective and still tackling, I think, probably one of the biggest issues surrounding conservation, which is the kind of diversification of it, which is fantastic to hear about. And yeah, I was going to ask a little bit about kind of Conservation Nation, and just to give a little bit more of a background, but I think you summed it up perfectly there, that it arose in the last year. There's kind of, yes, this little bit of a kind of shift, but was this always a kind of mission for you in your mind? Was it always kind of about the diversifying, or is this kind of something that's just come about in the last year? How's that kind of whole desire to kind of make it more diverse come about?
Yeah. So, I started running Friends of the National Zoo about 7 years ago or so, and was the first female leader of that organization in its 6-decade history. And when and you know this so well, Jack, it is impossible not to start meeting these conservation scientists and spending time with these animals and not feel such a need and a passion to help save them, save their habitats. And then in so doing, of course, save the planet, save us, save our children and our children to come. It's a huge interconnected cycle, obviously. And so I spent a lot of time with these amazing animal people, conservationists, wildlife veterinarians, endocrinologists, biologists, and it was quite clear that this was a need that what little I could do to help, I needed to be in it full on to help. And my team felt exactly the same way. And so, the silver lining, as you said, of this not being able to make it through as Friends of the National Zoo is that we were allowed to focus on this enormous passion area. And when you take a look at what we as a country are bringing to this fight to save wildlife and the planet, it's a little shocking, Jack. So our country is wonderfully diverse and growing increasingly more diverse. By 2030, about 3/4 of the country will be women, girls, and people of color. And you take a look at that statistic, and then you compare that against those who are going into the conservation field, feel comfortable in the conservation space, and you say something is broken in this system. How can it be okay that roughly 3/4 of our population is not feeling enfranchised and welcomed and supported in this field of conservation, which is absolutely essential for the survival of the planet? And so we said, you know what, we're going to do what little we can. We are going to do our part to help break down those barriers that are preventing women, girls, people of color, indigenous people, those from disadvantaged communities from feeling comfortable and supported and entering into the conservation space. Here, so it's sort of, physician heal thyself. It's very easy for us to look at other countries and point out things that are wrong when we have something in our own system that needs to be fixed immediately. And you look at, for example, the environmental science degree program in the States, and it is the least diverse program of graduates of any of them. So 2%, for example, of that program are African Americans. You look at the people working in the conservation field, and only around 4% of them are Hispanics, and yet Hispanic Americans make up 20% of our population. And so we did a little research. We reached out to conservationists, established conservationists and emerging conservationists with the survey, and got back some really amazing responses. So, 80% of them worked for free to get into the field of conservation. And as you can imagine, I would not have been able to spend my summers and my years post-education working for free. And this is a barrier that hits so many people that they're just simply not able to do that. They cannot afford to work for free. They have to work for money, as we do, right? And so 80% of them worked for free. Almost half of them worked for free for over a year. Almost half of them had to get a second job to afford to stay in conservation. And these barriers hit hardest, as you can imagine, against women, people of color, indigenous people, those from disadvantaged communities. And so you step back and you look at that and you say, these are barriers that need to drop if we as a country are going to do our fair share of this fight for wildlife conservation to save the planet. And I had the opportunity to talk to leaders of other wildlife conservation organizations. And we're tiny, Jack, as you know. And so these other organizations are huge. And 201, they want the exact same thing. 201, they are saying we need more diversity, more inclusion, more representation in our organizations. We want that. We are striving for that. But it's hard. It is hard to find folks who can come in and represent. And that is because it's not the fault of these wildlife conservation organizations. It's the fault of a system that starts in middle school and goes on up from there. And it's a fault of a system of how conservation has become a field of privilege from centuries of experience. So we said these are the barriers that we need to tackle, and that's why we're here.
And it's something that I think I've thought a lot about recently because it's something that we've had a couple guests on that have come on and talked about. Having more voices at the table of conservation can only make it a good thing. It can only make it stronger. It can only make it better. It can only come up with new solutions. And it's a shame that up until this point, all of the issues that are kind of are going on around the world, whether they be kind of social or conservation related, have all kind of come together in this way that have created just a negative space that are just, all of these issues are not being solved all at once. So it's nice that your organization has kind of identified these and come in and kind of swooped in to try and make it more diverse. And I think it's really interesting to hear about how you kind of identified those problems. And yeah, it's really, really interesting. And I think, yeah, so important. I think that's something I'm going to say that a lot probably throughout the podcast. So important, because it is so important, and I think the listeners really need to understand how important it is. And I think those statistics as well will definitely help them identify that. I think everybody in life sets out with this kind of love of nature and this kind of connection. You always, like, from very young, you want to be outdoors and you want to be exploring all these things. And so it's sad to see that once you reach a certain point, doors are closed in people's faces, and you're not getting beyond this point because of the circumstances that you were born. It just is awful. And so it is good to see that the organization is there to kind of support that and help kind of diversify the field. And I wonder, how do you go about when you have these massive issues going on around the United States and around kind of the world? What kind of once you kind of identified the problem, what's the first step to trying to fix it or try and kind of make it better, I suppose?
We're doing it 3 ways. Mm-hmm. So the first way we're doing it is through grants to wildlife conservationists who have made it from these traditionally underrepresented groups. So think women, people of color, Indigenous Americans, those from disadvantaged communities. We are finding them. We are saying, you go, you're doing fantastic work. Congratulations for making it. Here's some funding to help you with your wildlife conservation projects here and around the globe. We're going to amplify your voice. We're going to connect you. And we're going to ask you to be role models with us for the next generation. So our second piece is this role modeling. And, this issue starts so early, Jack. So, if you grow up in a community of firefighters, you are very likely to see a possible career opportunity as a firefighter, right? If you are not growing up in a community that is steeped in nature and has conservationists, and how many of us do, you are not likely to be envisioning that as a future for you. If you're not comfortable in nature, if you don't feel like nature and the outdoors is for you, then of course you're not going to be thinking about that. And these are some deep systemic problems that we have here in the States. You've probably heard of that famous draw scientist research study. So they ask kids of various ages to draw a scientist. Give them a piece of paper and crayons and say, draw a scientist. And here, 70% of 6-year-old girls, when asked to draw a scientist, drew a female scientist, which is fantastic. But by the time they're 16, only 25% of them draw a female scientist. And what happens in these middle school years is these kids, our brains are developing, and the sense of belonging is not only emotionally important, it's physiologically important. It is wired into the brain, and it starts coming out, this heightened sense of social circles and belonging and where do I fit in. And as this is happening, and girls, people of color, Indigenous people are not getting the right signals that they belong, they see role models, people who look like them, have walked a path like them in the conservation space, then they're doubly turned off, And so in this second pillar of what we're doing, we are looking to inspire and show role models. So we are going into underserved areas and helping kids, these amazing kids, see themselves as wildlife champions, all the way up to pursuing a career in wildlife conservation. So opening their eyes to wildlife conservation, showing them these conservationists who look like them, have walked paths like them, doing field trips, getting outside in nature, empowering them, giving them confidence. And so we just launched this pilot in 2 schools in Washington, D.C., and it's going quite well. And so we're looking to be expanding in this next school year coming up, and then hopefully rolling out across the nation. So that's our second way we're going to be doing it. And then our third way is convening. So as I mentioned earlier, every conservation organization I've talked to wants the exact same thing. And so we are pulling together communities of like-minded conservation organizations and funders and saying, this is not your fault. These are systemic challenges, and we can work together. And we, Little Conservation Nation, can just help be the pillar, be the fuel. We can help make this happen and figure out how together we can break down these barriers and change the system in a way that allows conservation to become a field that's as inclusive and representative as the world and as it needs to be to match the size of the challenge we're fighting. So those are the three ways we're doing it.
Yes, I think that's fantastic, and it's. I now have 100 different questions I want to ask you about all of these things. It's fantastic, and I think the main thing that's come out of that kind of description for me is this idea of your name is exactly spot on. Is you want to welcome more people into the conservation nation, because I feel like once you're in,
Exactly.
I feel like once you're in the conservation space, there is a lot of people who are very open-minded, very welcoming. It's just making sure the door is open
Yes,
to get people into that space and feel included in the space.
exactly.
And I think something that was resonating as well with me was kind of, while you were talking, I was thinking about, well, who did I look up to when I was younger? And who can I think of that was on
Mm.
television or when I went to, and it was
Mm.
as amazing as much as I love people like David Attenborough and kind of Steve Irwin and all of these kind of wildlife heroes that you see plastered all over the place, they are all white men. So it kind of,
Yes,
I can see why someone like, why my sister
yes,
maybe would disengage from that, because it doesn't necessarily speak to her. And I think, yeah, it's really interesting to kind of think about that and breaking down these walls and all of these things. Yeah,
exactly.
it's I mean, it's an interesting thing, I think, especially for people like it's something I learned, I think, when I went to do my masters. I think I went in with a very narrow-minded view of what conservation would be and kind of, this is the world that I want to see. And then I came out of it having been on my course. I had people from India and a girl from Louise, a girl from Sweden, and so people from across the world who had these different life experiences from me. I think it just shows how valuable these can be, because it opened my mind to this and made me realize, hang on, there's more than just these old white men on TV telling you about conservation. There's other amazing people out there, which yes I think a really, really important thing. And so yes, it's fantastic to hear about. I wondered, kind of something that I wanted to ask about was kind of, you were talking about the grants there. I actually read I was having a little look on the website, and you have been funding, or you gave a grant to somebody from the Giant Armadillo Conservation Project, who I've spoken to the Arno who runs that project on the show before. And so I was like, oh, that's fantastic. And so for listeners who maybe have kind of been wondering what sorts of projects you've been funding, things like that, but are there any other projects that out there that kind of examples of kind of projects that you'd like to talk about or tell the listeners about?
Oh, we've funded, so, we've done, 13 grants so far since we launched in September. So exciting. And so absolutely one of the new ones is helping support giant armadillos through Nina down in Brazil. Very excited about that. One of our other new ones is the building of bee fences. Are you familiar with those,
No.
Jack? You
Oh,
probably
I
are.
haven't heard about them.
So it's a wonderful
Mhm.
win-win and nature-based solution to a wildlife conflict
Mhm.
challenge. So elephants are naturally afraid of
Mhm.
bees. And so, as you can imagine, as humans are encroaching into traditional elephant habitat, and the elephants are being driven
Mhm.
out by climate change and other issues, they are coming closer and closer to villagers and
Mhm.
people. And in so doing, you've likely seen an elephant when it's walking, and it just tromps through fields and farms and villages and causes havoc
Mhm.
and destruction. And the villagers then get quite angry at the
Mhm.
elephants, as you can imagine. It's a no-win situation. And then the elephants are put at risk. And this sort of elegant solution is the building of fences made out of beehives. So if you can picture sort of a
Mhm.
pole, and on top of it is a beehive, and picture it sort of set up like a fence around an
Mhm.
area, around a village, around a field, around livestock areas, that sort of thing. And the elephants won't cross through the beehives. They smell the bees, they hear the bees, and they won't cross in. So the elephants stay
Mhm.
safe without any harm to them. The villagers and their areas stay safe, and then the villagers can also farm the honey from the
Mhm.
bees and make a little income from it. So we're working with Lorna, who is building beehive fences down in Tanzania. One of our other new grants is with Dr. Don Zimmerman, who's doing work to save threatened monkeys in Kenya. In our first round of grants, we have Cassandra, who's an Indigenous American woman who's doing some really interesting work to help understand how we can help forest owls adapt to climate
Mhm.
change. So their nest temperatures are critical, as you can
Mhm.
imagine. And as they get warmer and warmer, there are going to be issues. So doing some work to study how we can proactively help species in this fight against, the incoming onslaught of climate
Mhm.
change. But doing terrific work. So loving all of these 13 grants. Really fantastic.
Yes, and I think the bee one is especially interesting because not only does it protect the life, the elephants and the people, you're providing this kind of, I think everyone is aware of the kind of pollinator issue that's going on with all of the kind of littler creatures around the world.
Right.
You're providing a home for kind of pollinators as well, which is really, really an exciting and interesting way to think about it. And I think that's the thing I love about this show, is hearing about these conservation projects and ideas that maybe you didn't, are just kind of a bit crazy and just maybe people wouldn't have thought of before, but they're adding them in. We had Patricia Medici from the Lowland Tapir Conservation Initiative a few weeks ago talking about putting kind of reflective bands on collars for tapirs so that when they went out, you're not only being able to track them, when they kind of cross roads, the kind of cars and things see them. So I really appreciate these kind of double-handed kind of conservation ideas where you're kind of, it's not just a fence that's put up to protect things, it's a fence with a purpose. It's really, really clever. I really enjoy that. And I think, the other projects all sound fascinating. I think there's something that, I'd encourage everyone to go to the website and have a look, because your website is fantastic and filled with all of these great stories that I was able to kind of read through and have a look, and little case studies and things. So listeners, while we're chatting, if you want to be looking at these things and pictures of what we're talking about, it's probably all on there. And so, yes, something to kind of loop back to, though, I wanted to ask about was kind of the education side of it. So we talked about the grants and kind of establishing new role models, but there's also, I noticed, kind of a lot of work about education and having is it youth board or youth advisory council. So I think that would be that's something that I wanted to ask about, because I think it's a really important idea that you have the role models, but now you need to inspire the people who want to be like the role models. What kind of education work is it that you do?
Yeah, we're doing a few things. So we started the Conservation Nation Academy, which is this pilot program that's in two fabulous schools right now in DC, the Washington Jesuit Academy and the Washington School for Girls. And both of these schools are tuition-free, fully scholarship-funded schools for children from traditionally underrepresented communities. And so we are, through the help of our fabulous educators, a curriculum has been created. We are in the science classroom with these kids once a week for about an hour, and taking them through a curriculum that is designed to open their eyes to the field of wildlife conservation, inspire them to think of themselves as wildlife champions, give them an equitable leg up to help them get to that space, and encourage and provide confidence, show them people who've looked like them. So we are doing this work with the Conservation Nation Academy in this pilot program with big hopes to get into the DC public school system and then roll this out nationally and potentially globally. We're also involving youth, teen conservationists, because obviously they are the future. Our future is in their hands, and they are far smarter, savvier, more passionate, more driven, frankly, than anyone else. They see this. And so we are bringing in these young adults, teens, and saying, help us. So we have a youth advisory council of about 19 teens, young adults from across the country who are providing guidance and thoughts to us on our organization and how we can be doing better and bigger. And then we have our next gen conservationists, which are kids in the DC area who have raised their hand and said, I know I want to be a wildlife conservationist. And we're giving them these micro grants to do conservation projects in their community, helping them through the process. Here's how you think about setting up your program. Here's how you measure, giving them opportunities to report back on their results. So like a little microcosm of what it means to be a conservationist, sort of a holistic view of that. And these kids are fantastic. And I'll tell you what, Jack, when I go to sleep and I'm not nervous, and a whole lot of times I go to sleep nervous, but when I'm not nervous, it's because these kids, these young adults, they are so smart and committed and aware and driven. And I feel like the world will be a much better place thanks to them. And I'm so sorry for everything that we as a generation are leaving them with, but really buoyed by the fact that it could not be in better hands. So we feel at Conservation Nation that it's our responsibility to help break those barriers quickly, get it as good as we can get it for this next generation.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and it's something that I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but one of my my dissertation supervisor during my master's, the piece of advice that she gave to me when I was about to leave was never lose the kind of childlike joy for the environment and for conservation, because that's that time when you're kind of the most fit and you're most passionate and you're chatting about these things. And while it can be hard sometimes, don't let that kind of weigh you down. You've got to keep, because ultimately we're doing, no matter what age you are, you're doing these good things that are like, that will always bring up this kind of childlike, this is amazing, this is fantastic. And so, it's fantastic to hear about. And I think it's something that I wish that, I guess, I mean, I ended up in the field of conservation, but it's something that I wish kind of was more there, because I know there's so many of my friends when I was younger loved animals and loved going to the zoo or loved going down to the beach and looking for crabs or whatever it is, or kind of going to a park and looking at birds, but they kind of fell out of it because they maybe didn't have this push and the knowledge to go alongside the passion. So it's really exciting.
Exactly.
I didn't know, sorry, were you going to say something there? Oh,
no, I'm with you. I'm so with you.
No, yes, it's fantastic, and the youth advisory board, I think, as well, is really exciting, because I know here in the UK, I've spoken to someone from the Chester Zoo has a youth board here, and I think they're trying to expand and try and get these voices heard on a more serious level. And it's so nice to hear that you're taking youth voices seriously, because yes, they do, I think, sometimes come up with the best ideas. And you kind of think, why did I not think about that? Why did I not think of this? So fantastic. It's fantastic. I guess there's something else that I wanted to ask about that I noticed on your website as well. So alongside the kind of education and the grants and everything, I noticed that you have a speaker series that started last month and started again this month. I wondered if you could tell the listeners about that, because I know if they're listening to this podcast, they clearly like to hear people talk about conservation. I wondered, do you want to tell them a little bit about that as well?
Oh, I'd love to. So we just started it, Jack, as you mentioned. Thank you. We had our first one, which was focused on women in marine and freshwater conservation work, a fascinating one, with Dr. Nikki Traylor-Knowles, who started BWEAMS, the Black Women in Ecology, Environmental Marine Science, and Dr. Robin Abel up at Conservation International and the freshwater fish. So a really terrific conversation. But we have one coming up next Tuesday, so Tuesday the 26th. At 1 p.m. Eastern Time here in the States. We are doing a speaker series around One Health, which is such an important topic. So this is that discipline, critical discipline of conservation that says that wildlife, their habitats, and people are intrinsically connected, growing more and more so. And we need to be addressing this as an ecosystem, a holistic ecosystem, if we're going to succeed. And a really good example, very timely, relevant, sad example is COVID-19. So these pandemics, these global pandemics, traditionally start in wildlife. And because of human encroachment, human poaching, human illegal trading, we are picking up these pathogens from these wild animals. It's jumping over to humans, and then, of course, it's being spread. Any pathogen picked up in a remote country can be in every major city in 24 hours. So COVID-19 is a great example. Ebola, SARS, AIDS, those were all zoonotic pandemics that started in animals and because of human encroachment jumped to humans. And so part of One Health is sort of these, the Indiana Jones hunters trying to figure out where the next global pandemic sits and what animal and where they are, and then how we can help stop or mitigate that likelihood of a jump to humans. So that's a piece of it. Another piece of it is saving the wildlife from humans. So as we are encroaching on the territory of these animals, we're bringing our diseases, and our livestock and domesticated animals are bringing their diseases. And so we are decimating wildlife species in regions because they are picking up these diseases that we, our dogs, our cows, our sheep, are bringing into their area. And so that critical component of wildlife health because of humans, think of that as a reverse zoonotic disease, that also has to be addressed. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So it'll be next Tuesday at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, and I will have on Dr. Suzanne Murray, who runs the Smithsonian Global Health Program, so a huge player in the One Health space. And she's going to be talking about the terrific work that she is doing and her team is doing to help identify the next pandemic, save ourselves from animals, save animals from us, all of that. And then Dr. Deborah McCauley, who started VIEW, the Veterinarians Initiative for Endangered Wildlife. And she is going to be talking about her terrific work in the wildlife health component of conservation, which she says is the most underappreciated component of wildlife conservation. And she, for example, started a system, first of its kind system for a database for inputting and tracking wildlife death and disease issues in a way that allow conservationists to knit together stories and see the bigger picture. Like, oh, perhaps this isn't isolated, that all of these bison passed away in these thousands and thousands of acres. There actually is a connection, and we need to help fix that, stop whatever disease or issue is happening. So it should be a fascinating conversation. I've got way too many questions to cram into an hour, but it should be a great conversation.
You've definitely just got one more listener, because I was like, yes, I will be there. Like I was like, oh, if I'm free, I'll definitely tune in. Now I'm like, I will be there, and I'll make sure to tune in and funnel as many people as I can that way, because it sounds fascinating. And yeah, it's something that obviously for the podcast started talking about the pangolin because it's an underrepresented species, because it kind of represents all of these other stories of kind of being kind of underrepresented. The one time it has been represented is when it came to the pandemic, and it was discussed because it in connection with the bats and the kind of wet markets and the start of COVID-19. And so I think that's a really interesting thing for me, especially to kind of hear more about and learn more about, because I'm always looking to learn more about it. And so, yeah, it's really fascinating. And again, with the other side of it, with the transmission of disease between animals, I think when we think about a lot of the fact that there's Asiatic lions, for example, they're always the example I bring up because I think everyone loves lions, so they're a good example to use. But like, the Asiatic lion is only found in the Gir forest in India. And so if a disease was to get into that population, that's the type of thing that we would lose completely because of a disease making its way around a population. And I think a lot of people don't maybe realize how precarious some of these species and some of these amazing animals are. And that's fascinating.
You know, when canine distemper, because of people and our domesticated animals, sort of gained a foothold in Africa, it decimated the African wild dog population, I think in northern Kenya, down to one female African wild dog that was left. And on the lion topic, canine distemper has jumped to lions. And over 1,000 lions were killed in 7 months, I think back in 2017. And so you're absolutely right. And, you know, on pangolins, you would love a conversation with Dr. Suzanne Murray, because we were talking, I love her, and we were talking the other day, and she has a friend who's doing some really interesting pangolin work. So as you mentioned, pangolins are traded and poached and scales are used, and it's horrible. And she has a friend who's doing this really breakthrough work on identifying DNA from scales, from keratin. So it works on tusks, but it will also work on pangolin scales. And so when these pangolins are confiscated, hopefully alive, but when they are confiscated and found, and or it's a bag of scales, they can track that DNA back to its origin, which then allows them to have a much better shot at identifying these poachers and potentially government actors. And so this work, I think, could be a real breakthrough I love pangolins too, Jack, and it could be a real breakthrough for pangolins.
Yes. It's one of those ones that we kind of talk about them less now, but any opportunity to bring them up, I'm like, yes, we're going to talk about pangolins. They're getting brought up because, it's our namesake. It has to be done. And I think, yes. If you've got any questions planned to ask about those at the event, then I'll definitely be there. So yes, that's fascinating and fantastic to hear about, and kind of all of these different projects that we have going on. I feel like we could sit and talk about One Health all day, but I feel like we should focus on your organization and kind of the things that you do, since that's kind of what we're here for. But listeners, if you want to learn more, there is an event going on. This podcast, I believe, I'm going to launch on Monday the 25th, so we'll be just in time. So anyone who's tuning in on the day of release can go and listen to that. And I'm sure, will you record the event for afterwards as well? So if people listen to... Yes, I assume if you go onto the website, actually, whenever it's done, I'll add it to the description of this episode. So if you're looking for it, I'll put a link to it in the description for this as well. So yes, I've lost track of time. I've got distracted by pangolins. I've lost track of my questions. I'm going to have to... what was I going to... Oh, yes. So what I was going to ask, actually, looking back on all of these things, and maybe it's a diversity project that happened before Conservation Nation, when you were kind of still in your previous form. I wanted to ask you about some of the things that maybe you were proudest of? What are kind of the projects that you look back on and think that was really effective, or that was something that meant a lot to me personally? Or what are the ones that kind of stick out in your mind as being the things that you're proudest of when you look back on what you've done so far?
Yeah. I am most proud of something that we've just done. I'm proud of so much, but most proud of something that we've just done. So when we were in the process of the summer of 2021, I'm losing all these years. Don't all the years get so fuzzy, but 2021, when we were forming Conservation Nation and what we were going to be, we had a really meaningful conversation with a young, struggling conservationist out at Yellowstone. Her name is Taylor Bland. She's a Black woman in her 20s, passionate about conservation, particularly passionate about wolves and saving the wolves of Yellowstone. And so we had the chance to one of my friends had the chance to meet Taylor, and then we had a chance to have a conversation with Taylor, and it was really so inspiring. It became sort of a galvanizing, come on guys, this is exactly the right path. We've got to do this sort of thing. So Taylor had always known she wanted to be a conservationist, and spent all of her summers and time. She grew up in a community in Ohio, volunteering for free in order to get some conservation experience and animal care experience under her belt. She took the jump and went out to Yellowstone. She said she is the only Black face that she sees out in the park on any given day. A Yellowstone visitor, a Black woman, came up and hugged her at one point and said, "I'm so glad you're here. You're representing all of us." And so Taylor's got gumption and grit and passion and smarts, and she was working for free. She had a job to pay the bills, and then was working at the Yellowstone Project for free to keep gaining experience. And when we talked to her, she said, "I don't know how much longer I can do this. This is my life. This is my passion. This is what I want to do to help save the world. But I got to tell you, my local Taco Bell put a sign up down the street that they are paying $4 more per hour as a starting wage than this job I'm volunteering for free to try to get." She said, "I don't know how much longer I can go on." And Taylor's fiance, Jack, considered himself one of the lucky ones because his mom, a hairdresser, was able to work nights and evenings to give Jack the money he needed to pay to get a free internship. Because sometimes adding insult to injury, you don't have to work for free, you have to pay to work for free. And so Jack was able to make it. Jack is now going for his PhD. So anyways, Taylor was a galvanizing force for us. And I am probably most proud of the fact that we are now able to fund a paying position for Taylor at the Yellowstone Wolf Project, which is this incredible organization out at Yellowstone. Really, it's a globally recognized wolf organization. You may have seen them on 60 Minutes several times, but run by Doug and Rick McIntyre, and just a fantastic group of people. And we're about to be announcing soon that Taylor will be our first Conservation Nation Fellow with a paid position. So I'm very proud of that. It feels like in less than a year, we kind of went full circle. And I love that we did our part to get Taylor up there in a paid position that she so rightfully deserved and that they wanted to give her. Once again, it's nobody's fault. It's just that resources are so tight all around. The system is broken, and but yeah, super proud of that.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And even if she only ever reached that one woman who came up to her and gave her a hug, it was worth doing, because that's another person inspired to kind of maybe do their part for conservation. Like, that's fantastic. I think it's one of those stories that just makes you smile, that like you've managed to bring it all the way around to this like fantastic thing and make a difference that will go on, not just to impact through kind of this one individual, go on to make an impact to so many other maybe school kids who visit and see themselves represented, or kind of people who get dragged along with their kind of on like maybe they don't want to go, but they're being pulled along with kind of an after school club or whatever it is, and then they see someone like them and go, "This is exactly what I could be that person." That's fantastic.
Exactly. And we're videoing in Taylor to these kids, these girls and these boys here in the DC school system. And they are just sitting up and all eyes on, all attention on Taylor as she's talking about what she does and how she got there and why it's important. So she's inspiring all around.
I think people always say never work with children or animals. And I think that's completely wrong, because when you work with children and animals, it's the most inspiring and it's the most fun. I think it's the best way to do it. Yes, I think that's fantastic. And that's, something that I think, is a great kind of, in a first year, a fantastic thing for an organization to have achieved and ticked off kind of
Thank
look
you.
at that. We've already made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Now, kind of shifting lanes slightly, when I was on your website, I was having a look, and this is a podcast, as I say, that likes to focus on underrepresented, underappreciated kind of conservation issues. And on your website, there was a part that said, "What's your favourite animal?" And I wanted to ask you, because your favourite animal is one that I love, but I think is very underappreciated, and maybe people won't know what it is, which is the cassowary. So could you could you tell like the listeners maybe what a cassowary is and why it's your favourite?
Yeah, I do love the cassowary. And here I've got like this little. I have a cassowary sitting on my.
Perfect.
So the cassowary is a very large, dangerous, flightless bird. So indigenous to Australia, New Guinea, and other parts of the world there. And they can grow up to between 5 and 6 feet and weigh, 125 pounds. And they have sort of 5-inch razor sharp claws. And the cassowary is a fruit eater, but when confronted, when it needs to protect itself, it will jump. It can jump up to 7 feet. It will extend its 5-inch dagger-like claws, jump up to 7 feet, and swipe and disembowel anything that's threatening it. And there's something to me, so fascinating about this bird. So, and there's so much that we don't know about it. So they have this casque on the top of their head, which is made of keratin, but scientists still aren't sure exactly the function of that casque. So it could be for heat dispersal to keep them cool. It could be for sound dispersal. It could be that they're communicating in a way that we can't hear as humans. They are this exotic looking bird. So they've got these incredible bright blue and iridescent feathers and these big eyes, and they look like just this colorful, flashy emu, but they're not. They're this very deadly, mysterious creature. And I knew nothing about cassowaries when I started, running fawns at the Smithsonian National Zoo. And during the course of, onboarding process, there was a safety training, and the list of animals that need to be on a shoot to kill order in the event of an escape, and this is common across AZA accredited zoos, the cassowary is on there. It is the only bird that is on this shoot to kill order in the event of a terrible escape. And so it is guarded very closely, right? It is given its respect and independence and its space, but it's really sort of misunderstood, I think, and malaligned, Jack. And they're shy and cautious and cranky, and I don't know. Am I sort of projecting? Does it feel like me sometimes? Maybe I'm the cranky part. And I had a woman who worked for me when I first started at the zoo. So this was my first experience in a zoo, and so I came completely ill prepared, and I'm clomping around in high heels and skirts and looking like an absolute loon in the context of where I was. And reorganizing fawns. We needed a whole reorg. So a woman who worked for me, Elise, we were talking like, week 3 or something. And she asked me what my favorite animal was. And I said, I'm becoming so enamored with the cassowary. And she said, that makes sense. Flashy and dangerous. And I said, you're so right. You're so right. I'm looking ridiculous. So anyway, I've fallen in love with these cassowaries. And, there was a cassowary at the zoo, Lynn, who needed to move. She was all alone, needed a companion, and so needed to go over to Texas, AZA accredited zoo. But such care was taken in making sure she could do that comfortably. And so they're very cautious creatures. And so over the course of, I swear, Jack, I think it was a year, and it could have been a year and a half, a crate was very slowly built in Erlene's yard so that she could grow comfortable almost plank by plank with this crate, and eventually got to a place where she was comfortable walking through the crate, and then, one slat went up on one side and then one slat went up on another, and she would grow comfortable walking through that. So it came to a place where she was comfortable finally when the crate was done. She was comfortable in that space, and the zoo's terrific, and it's so important to them. You could just anesthetize an animal and ship them, but it's traumatic. So they spent that time to build this in a way that worked for her. And I love the people at that birdhouse, and I had the opportunity to go down and feed Erlene some grapes and pieces of pineapple, and just yeah, eye to eye, just sort of eye to eye with the cassowary behind this little wooden barrier. And I don't know. I love them. I love them. I know it's crazy, but I love them. And it sounds like you love them too.
Yes, yes. They're one of those things that I feel like you look at them and you think they're beautiful, but they're kind of frightening, so you might not
Yeah.
necessarily be inclined to love them straight away. But I think there's something about them that's just charismatic in this strange way, and I think it's something about the deep rooted love of Jurassic Park in me makes me look at them and think like Velociraptor type.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think they're the closest thing I'm ever going to get to a Velociraptor, so I love you.
I agree.
And yeah, there's been a couple of times where I work at Edinburgh Zoo, and when I've been running kind of the kids clubs on Saturdays, you have to go in obviously before the zoo's open to go and get everything set up and like make sure you've got your radio and everything. And there's been a couple times now where I've wandered past the cassowaries, and they'll be off in the corner, and then they'll clock you across. Like they'll know, you'll know you're being watched, and then all of a sudden you'll just hear this kind of like, and they're up at the fence like, hello, like it's like I don't know whether that was aggressive or friendly, but I love it because it's just they're fantastic things. And just yeah, I can see why you would love them. And yeah, I anyone who doesn't know what they look like, because we've described these kind of bizarre things, go and Google a picture of a cassowary, because they are fantastic. They are brilliant. They're brightly colored. I was being interviewed on another podcast recently, just the zoo of us, and I was talking about coloration in animals and how I like animals that are bright and colorful. And I think most people in those circumstances would maybe say, "Oh, a butterfly or a beautiful like hummingbird." And I went, "No, I think I love the coloration of something beautiful like the cassowary." And it was, as soon as I said that, I was like, no one is going to know really maybe what I'm talking about. But once you Google it, you'll understand just how beautiful and amazing they are. So yes, I had to ask, because it was it's one that I don't think gets enough love. So yes, and if there's any cassowary experts out there who want to come on the show and chat more about them, clearly I'm very excited by them. So shoot me an email, and I'll be more than happy to chat more. But yes, that's fantastic. And I guess that kind of was one of my final questions. The only thing really left for me to ask, that I'd like to ask everyone, is if someone's feeling inspired by this chat, or if someone is kind of thinking about everything that we've talked about so far, what advice would you give them to kind of either get involved or help kind of diversify the field of conservation themselves? How would you recommend that someone, yeah, if they want to help, it's an impossible question because it's such a big question. How can you help diversify the field of conservation yourself? But how would you recommend they get involved and kind of help out your cause?
Yeah, I would recommend that they support in whatever way they feel comfortable conservationists from traditionally underrepresented communities, because that support, that amplification of their voice, that role modeling is absolutely critical. So pick the species that speaks to you, pick the country that speaks to you, find an organization that is supporting conservationists who are people of color, indigenous people, women, those from disadvantaged communities, and follow, share, give money, whatever it is. We do that at Conservation Nation. You can come to conservationnation.org, but other organizations do it as well. So that to me would be the number one way. And then I would encourage you to help children open their eyes to everybody can and needs to be a wildlife champion. We will simply not win this fight to save the planet if everyone does not feel as if they are a valuable and important and integral piece of the solution in whatever way that may mean, from practicing more sustainable behaviors at home to volunteering to take kids on a nature walk, to becoming a conservation biologist, to wherever your career paths stop you, to embedding sustainable practices. If you are a hairdresser, stop buying products that contain palm oil, for example. So just helping people open their eyes to the fact that we need them. This fight to save the planet is our biggest existential threat, and we need everybody, every smart voice, every smart solution, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, level of privilege. Everyone needs to be in the fight.
I think that's the perfect message to leave on. I think it's such an inspirational message to leave on. I think there's not much more that can be said there, really. It's fantastic. And I think, yes, I would encourage everyone to go follow Conservation Nation everywhere to keep up to date, and it'll help you discover kind of new conservationists, new idols that you can show to people. People like Nina, who we talked about, who kind of works on the Giant Armadillo Project, and undoubtedly many more to come going forward as well. If people do want to follow you, actually, where is the best place for them to kind of, would you recommend they go to Twitter or Instagram? Do you have kind of, where's the best place for people to follow to keep up to date?
Yeah. So our website is conservationnation.org, and we are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can find us on any of those. If you look up Conservation Nation, our various handles will show up. And we would love to have followers and support and any ideas, very open to thoughts, ideas, suggestions.
Perfect. I'll put links to all of that in the description for this episode, so anyone just go click down there or copy and paste the handle to whatever website you want to go to, and yes, you can go and make sure and follow all of them. Down there you'll also find all of our details, so we're at Pangolin Podcast on everything, so you can follow us as well. If you're on Twitter and LinkedIn and everything anyway, you might as well. We are there, so make sure to follow us. You can also subscribe to the podcast on your podcast streaming service of choice. We also like to highlight all of these diverse voices. So if you've come here because you've seen Lynn post somewhere, join us because we have, as I've mentioned, we try and highlight as well these voices that are underrepresented. We've spoken to people from Madagascar all the way to kind of Brazil, to the UK, to the US, all over the world who are doing this amazing work. So if you would like to learn more about some projects like that, you can subscribe to us as well. And yes, I guess that's everything that I have to say. So apart from, of course, another massive thank you to you, Lynn, for joining me. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was such a pleasure, Jack. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, of course, to the listeners as well. And yes, until next time, goodbye, everybody.